weren't able to join us today, we'll have this available. And yes, we'll go ahead and get started now. As folks join us in, they'll be able to join us where we are. And okay, so good evening and thank you for joining us for episode 4 of our series, Candidate Conversations leading up to the 2020 general election on November 3rd. Tonight's event is honored to be hosted by the UC Merced Community Engagement Center and the Office of Government and Community Relations. My name is Lisa Calderon. My pronouns are they, them, and she, and I'm a 5th-year student majoring in political science and sociology and a minor in Chicano studies, and I'll be moderating our candidate discussion this evening. And I'll go ahead and let Ms. Renette Doty introduce herself as well.
Good evening and welcome. I am the director for the Community Engagement Center at UC Merced, and we're thrilled to be able to offer these conversations to get our community and our campus community connected and really involved in the life of the city. I will be behind the scenes monitoring. If you have questions throughout this evening, you're welcome to put those questions in the chat, and I'll try to get those questions out and to our moderator. And then following the main questions of the evening, we'll also give you an opportunity to unmute at the end and be able to ask some questions that way. So you'll have some time to voice your questions to our candidate this evening. With that, I'll hand it back to Lisette, and off we go.
Thank you so much. Okay, so during this series, as we sit behind our computer screens, our goal is to continue to provide platforms to engage with the candidates that hope to help build our community's future. It's clear that we're in unprecedented times, and due to the pandemic, we can't gather to engage in debate and discussion like we would usually do. We do feel it's important to find a way for members of our community at UC Merced, including students, faculty, and staff, to engage with the candidates running to represent us. And this virtual format also makes it easier for the UC Merced community to invite our friends and neighbors in the greater Merced community to join us in the discussion from the comfort of where we are. So welcome everyone, and please be sure to let your local family, friends, and neighbors know they are welcome to join us. We will be here until 7:30 today, so we have some time, or if not, on our upcoming sessions if they missed this one. Before we get started, it's important to acknowledge all local Indigenous peoples. Merced resides on Yoku and Miwok land. We acknowledge the Yoku and Miwok, the native inhabitants of this land. We embrace and respect Yoku and Miwok's continued connection to this region. Thank you for protecting and nurturing this land. Let us continuously acknowledge that we live, work, learn, and collaborate on Yoku and Miwok traditional homeland. We will now take a moment of gratitude to pay respect to Yoku and Miwok elders and to all Yoku and Miwok peoples, past and present. We'll take a minute and give gratitude. Thank you. Now, let me go over a few housekeeping items. All participants are muted upon entry. We encourage you to use the speaker view instead of gallery view. We will start with some pre-selected questions for the candidate. Participants can type questions into the chat and we will get to as many as we can during our time. If you would like to ask your question live, please use the raise hand function, which you can find at the bottom. If you click on participants, you'll be able to find the raise hand button. And we'll make sure to try to get to as many as we can in our allotted time. A reminder that this is meant to be a conversation and an opportunity to get to know the candidate, so please keep it respectful and on topic. Okay, so tonight we have the opportunity to hear from Michael Belluomini, candidate for Merced Mayor. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Belluomini. I'm excited for this opportunity for all of us to hear from you. And we'll go ahead and get started with our first question, which is, tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, and why you decided to run for city mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone for this opportunity to talk to you all and hopefully get you to know me a little better. So I was on the Merced City Council from 2013 to 2018, 5 years. And during that time, became very much aware of the importance of the mayor's role, even though he just one vote on the council, that doesn't have any special power in terms of voting or anything. I began to appreciate how much the mayor had an important role as a leader, speaking for the city to other government agencies, to businesses, to community groups, and representing the city in that way. And I thought it was impressive and important that there was this leader who was unifying the council and unifying the city in terms of finding a direction for the city. So I became interested then in running for mayor of Merced. Before I was on the city council, when I was on the city council, I was noted, I think, for bringing up new ideas, being very analytical about projects that came to the council, asking a lot of questions, trying to see ways to make things better. Before being on the city council, I worked for the Merced Union High School District for 22 years. So my training and planning, I have a master's degree in city planning. And before working for the high school district, I worked for some cities in the county during actual city planning. But the high school district hired me to initially to argue with city councils and the county board of supervisors regarding new development, especially residential development, needing to pay more to build school facilities. At the time, well, and it's still sort of true today, at the time, the state set a standard fee that every new house had to pay based on the size of the house. So it was a dollar amount per square foot. And it was woefully inadequate to fund the actual cost of building schools. And so I made presentations to Merced City Council, Atwater City Council, Livingston City Council, and the County Board of Supervisors, because the Merced Union High School District covers the high school facilities and the high schools in all those cities. And so that was a tough job in the sense that I was unpopular. Obviously, whenever I came to a meeting, they all kind of grimaced and, oh no, he's gonna be asking us for money and we don't really feel like it's our job to give more money to the schools, etc. So, so that culminated actually with, in another part of the state, there was a successful lawsuit where the California Environmental Quality Act was used to say that not having enough money for schools from new houses is an impact on the environment. And school districts could sue a city or a county if they were doing that. So when that happened in Southern California, then we went back to the cities and the counties. And again, I was the one responsible for preparing all the analysis about how much does it cost to build enough classrooms for every new house and all that sort of thing. And eventually we convinced the city and the county to charge more for school fees. And then maybe most importantly, Bellevue Ranch, which was a large development, like over 1,000 acres, that was under one ownership, signed a contract with the high school district and the elementary school district, agreeing to pay double the fee that the state had established. And so that was in 1995, I think. And so we established a pattern of new development paying its own way in terms of public facilities, school public facilities at least, which has lasted all this time. The development that you see happening in Bellevue Ranch still pays double what the normal state fee is as a result of that contract. And so the high school district and the elementary school district have in fact gained a lot of funding from local development. And then they've been able to take that and ask for matching funds from the state because the state has developed a matching program. So I did that. Then before working for, well, and then after 1996, the building industry lobbied the state government and got the law changed to where the construction of schools was no longer an environmental impact, and all of that went away. I mean, contract was still good, but we were no longer able to get additional funding for schools from developers. So then I was involved with planning new high schools. So I was involved with the construction and planning of Golden Valley High School, El Capitan High School, Buhack Colony High School in Atwater, and Livingston High School major expansion in Livingston. And then I was also put in charge of maintenance, so I understand contract law and construction, and supervised 23 people. So all that was, then before I was in working for the high school district, I was the planning director for the city of Tracy. If you know the city of Tracy, I was there the planning director for 4 years. It's a boom town. I mean, it's just on the edge of the East Bay, and it was just exploding with development when I was there. And I and the council and my team, et cetera, put together a plan for residential development. It's called a residential specific plan, and also one for industrial development, industrial specific plan, both of which have been implemented in the time that I've been gone, and give me a framework for how we might handle development in Merced, especially industrial development. Prior to going to Tracy, actually I continued to live in Merced and commuted to Tracy, but anyway, I was the planning director in Tracy. Prior to that, I was a city planner for the county of Merced. So my job there was to preserve farmland and to help provide plans for the small unincorporated communities like Planada and Winton, Franklin Beechwood, and other small places, Delhi. And so I did that and got to know the community and the county and the people who make Merced move. So that's kind of my work background. And then more personally, I was born and raised in Bakersfield. My parents were immigrants from Italy, from Lucca, Italy. So actually I grew up, they were, by the time I was born later in their life, they were already successful. My father was successful in business by that point. But I grew up speaking Italian as my first language. So I'm English as a second language kind of a student, and suffered actually pretty badly in kindergarten and first grade trying to catch up with English. Went to Catholic schools all the way from kindergarten through high school, and went to UCLA to get a bachelor's degree in psychology, more because I was just interested in the social sciences than really having an idea how I was going to use that. Got out, found out you really can't. There were limited job opportunities for a bachelor's in psychology, so I got a master's degree in city planning, which really appealed to me. In fact, I love city planning. It's a great field, really changes the world and makes the world a better place to live. So then shortly after getting my master's degree, I volunteered for the Peace Corps, and I was in Botswana, country in Southern Africa, just north of South Africa, country about the size of Texas. And I was there for 3 years doing village planning, because they have a lot of villages there, actually pretty good size villages for a native village. And my job was to see to the construction of one road, putting in a medical clinic, making sure the schools had electricity, putting in potable water supply from a well, and then trying to direct growth in terms of just where they would locate things. We didn't mess with how they built their houses or huts or whatever, but we were just trying to provide the basic facilities. And in some ways, it reminds me, or I guess what's going on now reminds me of that experience when I look at homelessness, because it was very simple housing, but the goal was to provide a sanitary situation in terms of healthy water and the ability to clean yourself, be hygienic, you know, and also to provide some electricity and shelter and that sort of thing. So anyway, that was all an interesting experience. And then when I was in Botswana, I worked with people from Europe for the most part. There were some Americans, but there were lots of people from Sweden and England and other places. And so I learned about Europe at the same time. So all that was very interesting. When I came to Merced and worked for the county, I thought at first, well, I won't be here very long. I'll, do this for a while and go someplace else. Well, then I met my wife. And so I've been here. We've been married 36 years and we've raised a family. And so I'm part of the community and committed to the community, been here a long time. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being born in Bakersfield, raised in Bakersfield, that's right at the Central Valley. And I
Yeah.
think you speak a lot on the development and being a part of the development, as well as I really resonate with to me the importance of having high schools, having that space available for our youth. I think that's really important to see. And I also relate. I was an English language learner. My first language is Spanish, so I spent some time in first grade as well in those classes. So I know what that's like. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that all the topics that you mentioned go right into our next question. So, what are the top 3 issues that to as Mayor Merced, if elected?
So my 3 top issues as mayor are these. So I think that the underlying problem or issue with many of Merced's problems is poverty. Poverty drives drug abuse, gang violence, homelessness, dropout rate out of high school, broken families, where there's one of the parents is missing. All those things I think are contributed to by poverty. And so I think the most important thing we can do is to try and create more employment opportunities with jobs that pay reasonable salaries. So my highest priority is to build an industrial park / business park in Merced. Right now, if an industry comes to Merced and they want to acquire some land to put in their industry, there basically is very little choice for them. There's less than 100 acres left out toward the airport industrial park. And there are problems with access to the airport industrial park for a lot of industries. They don't want to have to drive over all those local streets to get to the freeway. Excuse me. So when industries are shopping up and down the valley for someplace to put their new industry and bring jobs, they look at Madera or Turlock or other cities up and down the valley, and they find, oh, here's an industrial park where everything is there waiting for us. We just have to apply for a permit and start building our industry and we can go. And we don't have that in Merced, and it's holding us back significantly. So my first top priority is to build an industrial business park. And the place to put it has to do with this very valuable asset that the city has, but we're not capitalizing on. So the Highway 99 interchange at the interchange of Mission Avenue, Campus Parkway, and Highway 99 is like a $70–80 million interchange. I mean, it's a huge state investment. And it's surrounded essentially by vacant land right now. I mean, yeah, just basically vacant land. So on the east side of Highway 99 at the Campus Parkway interchange, I was on the city council when we approved, the city's approved 77-acre shopping center, apartment, hotel kind of a development thing oriented toward the freeway. But on the west side, it's basically a few dairies that are pretty small operations. The land is alfalfa fields and not intensely used, and it's very close to the city limits. So I think on that west side, we should build an industrial business park. And when I say an industrial park, I know that the trend is going away from nuts and bolts kinds of industries and going more towards high tech. But I just use business park as kind of an overall statement. I understand that we would be providing not only manufacturing of products, but providing of services, research on improving technology, et cetera, all in the same sort of a business park. And that we need to get that done now. So the question is, well, so how is the city involved? Well, the way the city is involved is we would zone the property for industrial, general plan designate it for industrial, and then we need to set up a financing mechanism and get the cooperation of landowners and and the industrial developer to put in curb, gutter, sidewalk, roads, sewer lines, water lines, drainage system, so that the property is ready for immediate development when a developer comes to town. And right now, if a developer comes to town, it's okay, start with an EIR, that'll take you 9 months, and then we'll go through the city council. So in a year from now, we'll be ready to go. If you do a master industrial plan, like I'm proposing, and like I did in Tracy, within broad parameters, the environmental impacts are already mitigated. They're explained. There's mitigation measures in the document. So when a developer comes to town, we can say, unless you're some extremely unusual kind of development that has very high, whatever, traffic or high gases or something. But if you're a normal kind of a industry, we already have your environmental document done. You can start right away. This is what it's going to cost you, and here's where we can locate you, and you can get started. And you're just a mile from, less than a mile from the interchange onto Highway 99, where you can bring product in to manufacture or export product out that you have manufactured to sell. So I think that's very important. My second item of importance has to do with providing for the youth of the community. Merced is unusual in its high percentage of people under the age of 20 years of age. We probably have, of the 90,000 people here, probably 25% of them are under the age of 20. And if you look at other cities, that not very many, in fact, I don't think any, have that kind of a statistic. We're a very young city, lots of young people. And we need to take care of our young people. Now, the schools obviously do the education, and they provide some athletics if you have good grades, if you're really talented at athletics. But I think it's the city's role through the Parks and Recreation Department to provide recreation programs for everyone, for students who maybe aren't the best academically or aren't the best at their particular sport, but they still want to participate. And so I think that Parks and Recreation Department here has been severely reduced over the years. It's getting a little better now, but back in 2009, I think 9 or 10 maybe, the director for Parks and Recreation and the assistant director of Parks and Recreation were dismissed, and they never filled those positions because about that same time, the recession hit. And so they said, well, we'll save money, we just won't fill these positions. And so whereas other departments, as we came out of the recession, were given more money and more staff, et cetera, Parks and Recreation really was never refunded to its previous levels. And even at its previous levels, it could have been better. So it's very important to me that we put more staff in the Parks and Recreation Department to provide more recreation programs for our youth. And the other complaint I get about Parks and Recreation is the parks maintenance side. People tell me, oh, we used to be so proud to take visitors to Merced to show them our parks and our bike paths. And now the parks and bike paths the lawns are dead and things aren't maintained and the bike paths are falling apart. And so I think besides doing recreation programming, which is very important, we also need to take better care of our parks. So that's my second high priority, is to get that done to help the young people of Merced. And it doesn't all have to be sports. I mean, it could also be drama or art or other kinds of recreational activities. And then my third high point or important point priority for the city is keeping Merced safe. So Merced needs to be safe, made safer in a number of ways. So from a physical point of view, we need a new police station, especially coming from someone who built high schools. When I went through the police station, I mean, it is deplorable. It's cramped and tiny and outdated and just in really bad shape. I mean, we desperately need a new police station. And the council kind of backed away from doing that. I pushed hard, and I would continue to push hard, that we need to build a new police station to provide the policemen the right facilities to do their job. Secondly, on a less physical level, it's important that we improve police-community relations. So in the 5 years that I was on council, it probably happened half a dozen times at least, when people would come up to the microphone during the public communication section of the city council meeting and complain about how the police treated them. Bad language, abusive use of force, unreasonable searches or whatever. I mean, people were complaining, and it tended to be people of color. And so it was apparent to me that there's something going on, and we have some sort of a problem. And then, we had the hookah lounge incident that UC students know all about, in which things, again, demonstrated that we have a police-community relations problem. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood. I think the police do a terrific job. It's very important, the role they do. It's a hard job to do, and I have a lot of respect for policemen. And when people talk about defunding the police department, well, I would never use that word. I mean, if my house is being broken into, I want to be able to call a policeman and have him come there to help me. But we need enough policemen to make sure everyone can work without having to work overtime, and that's enough. Then we need to try and make policemen's jobs better by reducing gang violence through giving young people something else to do, reducing having to deal with the homeless mental health issues by having mental health workers helping out in that situation. And actually the city council just did something to make that come about. So improving police-community relations is nothing new. It's not like we're inventing something. President Obama had a major study done when he was president in 12 cities in the United States about how to improve police-community relations. And one of those cities is Stockton, just an hour and a half north of here. And it's been very successful. So my recommendation to the council was, let's send the police chief to Stockton to investigate what they've done there and report back to us about how some of those ideas or procedures might be used here in Merced. I wasn't telling him what to do. I wasn't telling him he had to do anything. I was just saying, we need to do some research because I think there's an issue. And the council turned me down. In fact, I couldn't even get a second to my motion. They were afraid that any kind of statement like that appeared to indicate that the council was disparaging the police department. And that's not what was going on. In any case, so I would recommend that we look at having an advisory committee to the police chief so that every month the police chief meets for an hour or whatever time with this advisory council, and the advisory council members can depend on knowing that they're going to have the police chief's ear for an hour every month at a certain time, and they get into the habit of telling the police chief what they hear is going on. And members of the committee would be youth soccer league kind of people, representatives of the schools, representatives of churches, NAACP, I don't know, different kinds of groups, businessmen. So we would have a cross section. And that it wouldn't be, there's an ad hoc committee that the council has already set up as a result of the George Floyd protests. But don't know how long that's going to go on. But this committee should just be a standing committee that goes on every month. So and then I would recommend that we look at implicit bias training. So policemen, like all of us, have biases that are built into our psyche that we're not aware of, that we're not aware of for the most part. And yet it influences their job, and in their case, their job is influenced maybe more because of who they interact with and how they interact. So they need to have training to be aware of their biases and to try and modify them so as to not let their biases make them treat people unequally. Then I would want to do community policing as well, if that's acceptable to everybody involved. And that is where in neighborhoods that have the most crime, we send policemen out of their cars, walking down the street, door to door, handing out business cards saying, hey, I'm your policeman on this beat. If you have a problem or you think there's going to be a problem, here's my business card, give me a call. I'm here to help you. And they do that not just once, but maybe once a week or even more. so that people get to know their policemen in the troubled neighborhoods and are able to use them more and be effective in helping police themselves, you might say, help themselves in terms of increasing the law enforcement in their neighborhood. So I think all those kinds of things would be good. And then finally, in regards to keeping Merced safer, the fire department needs our support in the sense that there are two parts of Merced that are underserved. So in the far north part of Merced, around the UC, it's too far from the closest fire station. And the response time is not what it should be. We need to build another fire station in North Merced. In the southeast part of Merced by Weaver School District, if you know where that is, then it's the same thing. There really is not a fire station close enough to that Weaver School District area and we're doing a lot of new construction of houses in that area to serve that area. And so we need to build another fire station in the Weaver School District area to improve fire service there. So we need to be supportive of the fire department in that way in order to keep Merced safe. So those are my three areas of top priority.
Yeah.
On your first one, we did have a question in the chat and the question is Merced County more interested in developing the castle property for industry? Do you see a conflict with city/council?
Well, I don't see a conflict with city council. I mean, even at the city council, other areas were proposed by staff. They want to build some more out by the airport, or they want to build some more in other parts of Merced's existing industrial park, do an annexation. But again, I come back to the point that those other areas have difficulties with access. There isn't any place in the city that has the kind of access that's provided by Campus Parkway, Michigan Avenue, and Highway 99 interchange. It's a fabulous interchange. Access is terrific. The same thing goes for Castle. One of the big drawbacks as to why Castle has, for all these years, had trouble attracting major industry is because it's hard to get to if you're trying to get diesel trucks in there. I mean, Highway 99 is a couple of miles away, and on the way you have to drive past Butte Colony High School and a bunch of houses, and a lot of industrialists don't want to ship hazardous chemicals past the high school or deal with truck noise issues with the neighbors whose houses they're driving by. So there's all those kinds of issues. It's not a competition because the city's access to Highway 99 is so much better. I think the city's location would be the first choice every time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for that. I definitely very detailed response in terms of the way that poverty and the need of funding and resources, how that all just connects together to continuing to build up the resources that are provided to Merced. I also think that in relation to the topic on public safety and police and community relationships, it's definitely something that even like at our UC, it's an issue that we see everywhere. And so I think being very honest about the things that do need to change and what are ways that we can go about and improve that, I think it's something that I see similar in both our UC with UC Police Department and the City of Merced and Merced Police Department. I think that the way that like students interact with the police and on campus and in the city also kind of like sets the precedent for maybe the concerns that have come up in the past. I know a couple of days ago, actually, I joined the Merced has a police advisory board. So something very similar to the advisory board that you were talking about. And they mentioned how on our campus, almost every, if not every Black professor that's in the engineering department has had an interaction with the UC Merced Police Department. And most of them have been negative, if not all, to where they were questioned or they felt like they were just holding the hand on the gun. So I think that addressing that things need to change and how it kind of interrelates back to our youth and the funding and resources. We did have a question come in. Do you have a website where you share your top priorities or maybe further where we can have some more information about your platform?
Yes, my website is Belluomini for Mayor. So of course the only hard part of that is spelling Belluomini. So Belluomini, Belluomini for Mayor, www.belluominiformayor.com, and that will get you to my website. And then I also have a Facebook page. If you can't remember all that, Michael Belluomini for Mayor's Facebook has a link in the Facebook page to my website. And I think you'll find I talk about these topics, the police, community relations, and industrial development, etc., on both Facebook and the webpage, and I think you'll find that interesting.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. I think also if it's beneficial, we can send that link in on the chat. I can go ahead and send that in for folks. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for that response. In our next question, and you talked a little bit about it in your initial response. So if there's anything, any part of it that you still want to talk about. So Merced is referred to as a city on the rise. And in your previous response to the Merced NAACP question to a city slogan was listen, plan, and act. How would you continue the city's progress through your slogan while still addressing the concerns of families and businesses that have been here for decades? And how do you make sure that the longtime residents of Merced aren't left out?
Yeah, my slogan is listen, plan, act. And the reason for that is actually, I guess, a 3-word synopsis of the city planning process and in some ways the democratic process. So I think it's very important that the city listen to members of the community. And actually our city council does a reasonably good job of listening. We have town hall meetings in 3 or 4 different locations every February and March. And people come out, turnout is pretty good, and they talk about what it is they're concerned about. Trash collection, potholes, issues with crime, whatever. And the city's pretty good about taking notes and responding to people at those town hall meetings. And then we also, I think the city council is reasonably good at listening when it comes to communication at the podium at regular city council meetings and in other ways. Then plan. The city sometimes is pretty good at planning to solve these problems. The council will assign staff to try and come up with some sort of a planned solution for these problems. And sometimes that happens quite slowly, which is frustrating, and other times it happens. And then finally, act. So there's no point in listening and making a plan if you're not going to do something that actually changes people's lives for the better. And actually, my criticism of the council would be that there's a lot of that. That when the plans come back and it comes time to act, the council or the staff say, well, we haven't got the money, we haven't got the manpower, we can't really do this very effectively. Maybe we should wait for, I don't know, whatever, a state grant to come in or something else to change outside of our influence and wait until the opportunity arises. And so nothing happens. And I think that's very frustrating to the public whose expectations were raised by the input of the town hall meetings and through even the meetings where plans were developed. I think it's important that we stick with that process, but when it comes time to act, we actually find ways to make things happen. And don't be afraid to ask for funding or to seek grants or even to ask people to tax themselves if it's for a good cause. People will rise up if they believe in what you're doing and tax themselves. I can attest to that. I passed 2 bonds to build high schools when I was working for the high school district, and the people voted. One was passed in 2008, so the recession was just on its way, basically starting to already happen. And people voted to tax themselves because they really wanted to build El Capitan High School and do a lot of other improvements. So if if you present a convincing argument, they will help themselves. This question about how do you make sure that longtime residents of Merced aren't left out from being a city on the rise, kind of has as its premise that is the case. And I don't know that is the case. I think one of the nicest qualities, best qualities of Merced, and one of the strong qualities of Merced is that for being a city of 90,000 people, if you live here and get out and know, go to events and stuff, it has the feeling of a small town. You will get to where you bump into people at the grocery store or whenever you go out, people that you know. I mean, there's very much a feeling of being in a town where everybody knows each other, or at least lots of people know each other. And that's a very positive quality. I think even as Merced changes, and I think the University of California and the changes associated with that growth have all been basically very positive for Merced. The old-time residents, so to speak, look forward to having their community more prosperous and doing better. So I don't think they're going to feel left out, and they're not bashful about speaking their mind. I mean, you can see this last tax to enlarge Merced Community College. There was a big opposition movement against it, and so people are not afraid to speak their minds. So I don't think they will feel left out. Yeah. So yeah. So I think that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely goes back to the unity and moving in the city as like a unified community. Thank you for your response. And that we did have a question come in. How do you envision the relationship between the mayor and the elected council members? The local council has been pretty contentious lately, is how the message ends.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I would agree that there's been a fair amount of turmoil at the city council meetings in the last couple of months. I think the mayor is a team leader. He needs to bring the city council members together. One of the things that was very big on when I was on city council and tried to promote was that we need to have team meetings or council meetings in which all we talked about was our goals and objectives and our philosophy. So not real specific, but more generalized about what is it we're trying to do as a council to get things to happen, and trying to bring everybody together in the same direction with the same purpose and the same ground rules as to how we were going to behave. And if I was elected mayor, that would be a high priority for me. When I was at the high school district, the board of trustees of the high school regularly had meetings in which they met to talk about what are our priorities, where should we prioritize our funding, our spending our money, what things are not so important, which things are most important. We need to be doing that. And they say that we do that at budget meetings, but when you listen to the budget meetings of the city council, it tends to be, this is the city manager's recommendation. Everybody says, yeah, that's good. And that's it. I mean, there isn't really a meaty discussion about what are our priorities and why are we doing the things we're doing and how could we do them differently, that kind of thing. And I would advocate and try and lead the council in doing that. In terms of my relationship to the council, the relationship of the mayor is a little different. So the mayor conducts the meetings, so he can set the order of the agenda. He decides who gets to speak first, second, and third. He's the one who can decide how audience participation is modified. And then right now the council operates without any kind of Robert's Rules of Order, any parliamentary procedure. And I wouldn't want to get bogged down in the details of heavy duty parliamentary procedure, but there needs to be more of a structure as to how parliamentary or meeting procedure occurs. So I would work to try and make that better. And then again, outside of the council meetings, the mayor is the representative of the city to the federal government, the state government, state agencies, the county, to businesses, nonprofits, the university, et cetera. And so I think it's important for the mayor to do that and to bring back to the council his view about how we're being taken care of or interpreted by the rest of the world. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I see the benefits in having those times allocated to where those intentions are talked about and there's a consensus of more of an agreement so that when there are the city council meetings, there's like an evil a leveled idea of where you all want to go ahead and go into. So I definitely I agree with the benefits of that. Thank you for that. We do have one more question. As mayor, what are your plans for Merced City budget allocation?
Whoa, well, that's a broad question. So, um, a budget is a statement of priorities in numbers. So I would need to discuss with the council, whichever council members are elected, to go over their priorities and the priorities they perceive for the community. And then we need to translate that into budget numbers for each department and each function. And I've already said, for me, I think the budget is out of balance in regards to the funding for Parks and Recreation. Actually, if you go to my website, there's a video of me making a presentation to the City Council back in 2016, I think it was, in which I did an analysis of Merced City's expenditures on police, fire, and Parks and Recreation compared to Turlock, Tracy, and maybe Madera or a couple others. And we were out of balance. Our expenditures on police were a little high. Expenditures on fire department were about the same as the others, and expenditures on Parks and Recreation were low. So I don't know how other council members would feel, but I would try and convince them that we need to adjust our budget expenditures to reflect what our priorities are for trying to improve the city.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for that. We have like about 8 minutes left. So if there are any other questions that you all have within this time, please go ahead and send them in. I did want to just go ahead and ask, as a student myself, when I was attending UC Merced and I was living on campus, there was a lot of conversations among the student body about UC Merced and how it is or it isn't incorporated into the city itself. And I believe it was my second year that I learned that UC Merced itself isn't a part of a district within Merced. So I wanted to ask about your thoughts on that, or maybe in the future, in the near future, what do you think it could look like for UC Merced, the university, to be included as in a district or as a part of a district in Merced City?
Okay, so what you're touching on is an issue that's been going on for quite a long time. So, and it's complicated, but with lack of time, state law says that you can't annex, you can't bring land into the city limits unless the land is touching the city limits. So the closest city limit to UC Merced is all the way over on G Street. So it's like a mile and a half away. So for years, while I was on the council, there was talk and to try and make that annexation happen. The intervening property owners were fighting it because they feel like other property that they own further south in Merced should be allowed to develop first. And so there was a lot of resistance. Now, I'll give Adam Gray, our state assemblyman, credit for coming up with an interesting solution. So Adam Gray has proposed to change the state law, and I think actually it's passed now, to change the state law to allow just the University of California at Merced to be annexed to the city of Merced, with the only connection being Bellevue Road. The properties on each side of Bellevue Road would not be annexed, but Bellevue Road itself would stretch out in this little narrow piece of the city of Merced to connect to UC Merced, and that would allow it to be annexed. And then after that, then any properties touching those boundaries could try and annex into the city. If that were to happen, then UC Merced would, the people who live there would need to have a city council member representing them, and so they would have to be in a city council district. So that kind of extraordinary process that, as a result of not being able to work it out locally, is being worked out by the state law. And I think there's some progress being made there.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing information. I know we've been wondering what where that conversation is going and what maybe ideas or plans are for that. I think that there's a lot of ways that students do feel connected to the city. I think it goes right back into whether folks stay in Merced if they head out after graduation. And I think that it being brought up at a state level can be a great opportunity, as I see it, for just another form of connection into the city and the way that the university that we integrate into Merced City and our students as well. I do want to give time for a question that came into the chat. How do you feel about Proposition 15 as it would apply to Merced?
Right, so Proposition 15 is the state ballot measure that would basically increase taxes on large businesses. So right now, all property is protected by Proposition 13 from back in 1978, so that the property tax doesn't increase except at 2% a year. So it's a very slow increase in property tax. And what Prop 15 would do is say, well, if you're a large business, then we're going to allow the taxes to go up at the actual market rate for the property. So it would generate a tremendous amount of more taxes, which a lot of them would go to local government and schools. And the one paying most of that would be large corporations. So, I mean, I think it's an attempt to take the extreme wealth, it's like the top 3% of the wealthy people in the United States control, 70% of the wealth of the country or something. There's this huge have and have nots kind of divide. And it's an attempt to try and get some of that money back down to city government and local schools and try and make things better. And in general, I worry about small businesses. They can't take any more beating up, any more taxes, and smaller operations. But my understanding, is pretty rudimentary of Proposition 15. It's exempts those kind of small businesses, and it only aims at large businesses. So I think my initial reaction is it's a good idea, and we need to take corporations that are saving up huge amounts of money and spread some of that money out into government service, be it schools or cities or whatever, because the public in general needs a lot of service.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that response. Before we end the conversation, we do want to give you, the candidate, a minute or so for any closing remarks or any final statements that you would like to say.
Well, when you're deciding who to vote for mayor, you need to compare the candidates. And I think that if you look at my record, go to my webpage, watch the videos of me when I was on city council, you will see that I had a reputation and I worked hard to bring new ideas and be proactive and try and cause change to happen in the city that would make things better. And quite frankly, the other people running for mayor have very little of that. Maybe they've done 1 or 2 new ideas each, and I did like 15 new ideas over the 5 years that I was in council. So if you want someone who is really proactive in trying to lead the city and change things, that's me. And you need to give that consideration when you're deciding who to vote for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Belluomini, for participating, for letting us get to know you a little bit better. And to all of our participants, thank you so much for joining us today. There are many ways that we can be involved in local elections. And one of those ways is if you're eligible to vote, please go ahead. Make sure you're registered by visiting registertovote.ca.gov. Along with a lot of other ways to just be involved in our local communities. And we welcome you all to join us for our upcoming candidate conversations. Our next one is actually tomorrow, Thursday, October 1st, and we'll be joined by mayoral candidate Matt Serrato. You all can also visit events.ucmerced.edu for future dates and candidates, as well as opportunities to register and have the direct link to join us on our Zoom meeting. Thank you all once again, and we'll go ahead and see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You. Okay, so we're still recording, but thank you all. We'll go ahead and end this meeting, and we hope to see you all tomorrow.